We're about to find out I'm Google's least technical employee. So you guys are going to make sure. Good. That helps. Now I'm really little behind here. Thanks for having me. A couple things I want to say, explain a little bit. I'm probably not what you expect from a Google employee. I'm in fact old enough to be the mother of the average Google employee. I think our average employee age is 28, which is depressing to me almost every day. I'm also not an engineer. I'm not a highly technical person at all. I'm barely technical. And I'm also someone who is absolutely not an economist, and I hope you cut me slack and accept that problem. So what I want to talk a little bit, though, is I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic power of the internet. I'm going to talk about some interesting ideas we have for leveraging that power in different ways. But before I start on that, I thought I should talk actually a little bit about Google's philosophy towards innovation. So at Google, obviously a company that was formed, I think in 2 weeks we reach our 15th birthday. And truly, it's the proverbial garage startup. We have the photos of our founders in a garage doing the first bit. And they had a very audacious and ambitious philosophy. So there they were, guys in their mid-20s, working out of a garage, who set themselves the mission to organize all the world's information and make it available and useful. It's a pretty big job, a pretty big mission. And we still go with that. And along the way, right, we started with search. We made search different and better. Gmail evolved, Maps, YouTube, Android phone operating system, and of course now people are reading about Google Glass, the self-driving cars. There's just Loon, the balloons for the wireless internet connectivity, item after item. But what we worry about this at every level of the company every day, how do we stay innovative? How do we keep in that space where anything seems possible? No dream is too big. We don't get too cautious. And in a world where we're now a big company, our brand name becomes a verb. There are rules, there are all sorts of things. How do we slow down? How do we make sure that we don't slow down and we think the big thought? And I think the simplest way we try and keep that focus is something that one of our founders and now our CEO, Larry Page, says all the time, which is, 10% improvement is good. I mean, lots of us would be very happy with it, but in fact, we should always be thinking about 10x improvement, changing things 10x. You just change things a little bit at 10%. To really make sort of change that's real change, you need to look at the 10x way of doing things. So in encouraging us to push farther and do that and keep that focus, understanding that that's fraught with risk, but to not penalize reasonable risk-taking, but reward it. So that's a little bit about innovation. What I want to talk about now is actually the economic growth message. One of the real dangers is that you see everything from the space you sit in. So frankly, we were kind of surprised a few years ago where, we sit and we see small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses succeeding and triumphing because of tools they can leverage from the digital world. We see every day talking to entrepreneurs with exciting new ideas, original ideas, incredible things they're doing. We see that, we see the value. We see them becoming successful. But we were stunned to discover that governments, I work in public policy, so governments is largely who I deal with, just didn't see it. They saw, kind of interesting, they use their email, occasionally search, but they largely thought of the internet as a place where people played some games, did some social media, and they didn't get the economic power. So we were lucky that both with some prodding and some monetary support from Google, we got some groups to start looking at quantifying the economic impact. And then, as all things, that starts and more people get on and more people look at it. So we had this really, we got a lot of interesting information about it. And so because you're economists and because we live in an internet world where you can fact check me, I'm going to make sure I read you the correct numbers. So most of these numbers are coming from McKinsey. And so one of the things I want to say that, okay, so in their measures, they did a study of what they called aspiring economies. And they said that 1.9% of GDP growth in these aspiring economies was a function of the internet, was driven by the internet. Now, in this study, they actually they did a deep dive on India, where the number was 1.6% of GDP. Now, in a similar study they did of developed economies, the number was 3.4%. And in the developing economies, you saw a great disparity between like Sweden, that was at 7%, and UK, which I think was a bit over 6%, and Germany and France that were down at 3.2, 3.4, and so, which allowed you to ask some interesting questions about what made them different. But these are significant numbers, right? I mean, even 1.9% of GDP really matters, and and obviously it has the potential to go much higher. And another number they looked at was this consumer surplus. So in the aspiring economies, it was $9 to $26 per month was the consumer surplus the internet brought. In the developing economies, it was $18 to $28 a month. So those are all significant numbers. It begins to show you that the internet isn't something we play. It's something that we prosper with and something we really benefit from. But to me, one of the most interesting aspects, and it becomes an incredibly important point for governments and policymakers to understand, is that 75% of that benefit from the internet goes to, sort of regular companies, like brick and mortar. It's not Google and Microsoft and Intel and great companies that are in the middle of the web space. It's the regular guys running very factories, traditional businesses. They're the ones that are really deriving the benefit. What the internet becomes is, it's part of everything companies do. It's the air they breathe. So these become really important and really need to focus on this and understand that this isn't a sideline we look at, but it's something that's in the middle of economic growth and economic opportunity. And it powers so many people, and it lets people do things in innovative ways. And much of the entrepreneurship that goes on in the world, if not directly internet driven, is touched by the internet. And let me step back a second. For that 75%, you say, well, what is it really? Well, look, it's using cloud services, good email, being able to now, businesses big and small have better business information at their fingertips. A small company can have better information about how to source their inputs. They have better information about how they can price their goods because they know what the market is really like. They have great tools in the cloud that give them a sort of a built-in disaster recovery. A flood comes, their little tower computer gets washed away. Doesn't matter. It's in the cloud. It lets things be updated faster. It lets them have fresher, safer software. Those are the kinds of things that go on. So that's where they derive the core benefit, and then others take it a step farther, is whether they reach customers or actually build a business on the internet. I want to give you a couple examples from the region. This is a Pakistan company that hand makes shoes. And they were featured in a project that we at the Punjab government working with Google did. And so they sell shoes, handmade shoes, to consumers around the world from a website. And you can't get more traditional business than handmade shoes. But they're now what we might call a sort of a micro multinational. So that's a very traditional business. Another I want to highlight is a company called Redbus. Now they sell online bus tickets in India. So that's sort of moving in a different way, right? It's a little more tech. It's online, but bus tickets are bus tickets, Everybody needs them. So those are the kinds of ideas. And we see, on a little scale, but we see it's the power of these small businesses that can reach out and do things in a different and better way and move forward. So now what I want to just sort of touch on is some of our ideas that we've thought about. I'm going to go through them very quickly, so if there are any of interest, we can pursue in questions. But the idea of creating opportunities for growth, and this sort of builds on what I was just saying. There are real, incredible opportunities for businesses to expand and do things. It used to be, right, your small business, your customer base, where basically people walk by your business. And maybe you got a little bit bigger, maybe you could reach out and advertise in the local newspaper, stretch out a little bit more, maybe local radio. But you had to be one of the big guys to go on television, right? And one of the giant guys to reach out internationally. But that's not true anymore. Hometown Shoes can be selling their shoes to somebody in Lahore, in New York, in London, in Colombo. They can do it because they now have a tool that lets them, by internet advertising, reach out anywhere. And so that becomes an enormous tool in this sort of creating opportunities. And it can be local, it can be international, but all those things happen. But one of the things about that we're really concerned is keeping focused on letting it happen. You need to make sure that the opportunities exist and that we don't make a mistake in rules or regs that complicate and make it more difficult for someone to succeed, to be able to be this micro multinational. Often, I think, in regulations and rules, we have unintended consequences. And so I think there really needs to be a focus on that. And sometimes I think the internet's disruptive and scary, right? And people say just about anything. And lots of that can be deeply troubling. And certainly we all need to work together to help people understand how to evaluate what they should believe and not believe, how they should behave, a level of civility. But one of the things we often see is that government leaders, political figures, aren't very accustomed to public criticism. And they get really agitated by some of the things that are said on the internet. And often they want to clamp down and limit things and limit how things are done. And there are very dangerous consequences to that because what they think that the internet is just a place where people talk, and they forget it's a place where people do business. And there are consequences around it. So always urge them not to forget that. A little story is in Vietnam, one of the countries I cover. Vietnamese businesses, small businesses, creative businesses, are increasingly registering their businesses in Singapore. Now they're choosing Singapore because it's got good rule of law, it's got good IP law. You know what's going to happen there, right? It's predictable. And then they go back home to Vietnam and with the people they know, the incredibly talented people there, develop their product, but they register it there. That's not really good for Vietnam, but it is so prevalent and recognized as such a normal thing that we've actually heard Vietnamese government officials advocate that people do that. I mean, it's crazy. We've also seen that a study from Booz and Company looked at where do angel investors decide to invest? And that's important because you need that angel investment, obviously, to make the leap, to scale, and move on. And they choose to make their investments in a world filled with opportunities in places that have predictable regulatory regimes and ones that aren't too heavy-handed. So frankly, those Vietnamese companies are wise on yet another level because in Singapore, they have a chance to get angel investment. Nobody's going to make that angel investment in Vietnam. And we see that kind of thing happening in country after country. So this is quite simple. Look, also the problem, the internet is such a powerful tool for SMEs, but those are the companies, and most entrepreneurs start as SMEs, those are the companies that are least able to work their way through complex bureaucratic regulatory mazes. So it needs to be easy to register your business. It needs to be easy to figure out custom rules, right? It needs to be easy to do online payments. All of that needs to be easy. And governments need to really step back and make it easier, not harder. Peel back the layers of the regulatory onion and get it clear. Now, in the public sector, I think that there's two key areas we see are big ways that the public sector should focus on the internet. One is using the internet more for public services. We see that, right? We see more public services online, you know, paying taxes, registering for things, all that true, more and more. Just this morning I woke up to read a story that yesterday in Australia, the opposition Liberals released their digital manifesto, which among the points was that all government services should be online. It should be all that way. And you think you're just days before a national election, and they recognize that that kind of efficiency is something that's, you know, politically popular and feasible. So that's important. So I want to give you an example of this, because this is hard for governments because it takes an investment, and everybody's sort of short on cash. So I'm going to use an example from Korea. So they decided to put their government procurement online. Now, in fairness, this is a process that costs them many millions of dollars each and every year to keep this system up. So it is not it's an investment. It takes vision. It's not necessarily an easy sell at first. But what I can tell you is already, so last year, the government and participants in online government procurement in Korea realized benefits of over $6 billion. And that's $6 billion across $50 billion in procurement. But that's a pretty nice ratio. So that's the kind of thing, looking at doing those big systems things. But that's hard. But it can be done, and there's lots of demonstration of how well it works. It's also, you know, online government stuff is a great way also to reduce graft. When hands don't touch, it's a little bit harder for the money to move as well. But another thing is public sector information, making it available. You know, and let's be clear, I'm not talking about somebody's personal information, but broad public sector information to be used by the government and across government agencies better, but also just making it available to the public. So think about this. It could be something that provides you with, you know, where there are particular health issues, where you should be doing more preventative medicine, improving traffic flow, traffic information. And a really important piece of this, though, is make it available to the public. Let innovators and entrepreneurs use that information for cool products that are, you know, big and small, you know, better mapping, better traffic patterns, you know, in the city of Chicago, they've used the information in flu season to let people know where flu shots are still available. You know, when your car's been towed, where is it? Done by the private sector instead of the public sector, cheaply, easily, you know, no cost to the government to get that kind of thing done. And by the way, right, that information collected by the government, I mean, I would argue is the people's information. They're paying for it with their taxes. So move on to, you know, the investing in human capital. This is really just touching on education. And I don't want for a minute to suggest that the internet solves our education problems. I mean, education is complex and important, and it requires excellent teachers, and it requires schools and contacts with students, with each other at every level, and with educators at every level. But there are certainly things we can do to improve education. One of those things we would argue is openly licensed, publicly funded educational resources. You know, so let people have access to them. In the spirit of this are ideas like Khan Academy that provide educational services, or MIT's OpenCourseWare. I was looking at some numbers on this. So for MIT's OpenCourseWare, they had 133 million unique visits and 95 million people who came back. 43% of the people that enrolled in these MIT Open Courseworks were people who were were doing it personally. It was self. It was sort of personal enrichment. And this is just a great way for people to enrich themselves in a difficult time with limited opportunities to get access to the best possible education and do things. The other thing is supplementing education with online tools. Almost all of these cool online tools are things that people just develop. They're not, governments don't have to pay for them, people don't pay for them, they're there. They make education a richer and more exciting experience. They certainly don't replace a teacher or replace a school, they just augment it. And people can succeed, entrepreneurs can succeed, and actually, even in providing free services, they can make money out of it in a host of other ways, which we've seen. The other I want to touch on, this is really done almost, is this idea of optimizing existing infrastructure, whether it's transportation or communication or energy. There are so many ways that we can make this better. Quickly, just some quick ideas, the way people are doing this. Measuring energy, right? If you know what you're using, you might use less. In fact, you'll definitely use less. We've seen this in the US in particular. So letting people know, they'll use it better. In a similar thing, you behave better around things which you measure. Ideas about, besides energy usage, data usage, telephone usage, all of these things make you better. Transportation data, right? We spend so much energy and time in transportation, but if we had better maps, if we had more real-time information about where traffic was slow, if we had more information about exactly when our public transportation was arriving, if we knew how many spaces were left on that bus or train, all these things would make us more efficient. These are all already done in many places. They can be done in many more by simply making the information available. And of course, I work for Google, and we're kind of excited about the self-driving car and its opportunities to actually take cars off the road, make driving safer. This is also another area where, being able to share information, have open standards will speed that process and make sure there are a lot of players in that particular area. Internet speeds, hey, let's measure. There's a great consortium called Measurement Lab. And as an individual, you can go in and measure your upload and download speed. Are you getting what you paid for? But also, government institutions can be measuring it. Other people can measure it. People can be analyzing it. Those are all good stuff. And last point on R&D. R&D is really important, obviously. We at Google approach R&D in very much this way, which is this idea that have challenges. So we look at the Human Genome Project, right? A number of different research teams going at that to get to the conclusion. And it paid off. Projects like the X Prize, where different enormous research projects, are put out there, people pursue them. If you get it done, you get the money, and it works. Another idea is also this idea of publicly funded research. Get that data out there and let other people manipulate with it and work with it. All these things are really important. So the bottom line is, look, there's so much going on out there. We have so many opportunities to innovate, succeed, make things work. And we just need to understand that it's there, to push it forward, and to keep our eyes on the idea that we're not doing things to slow it down. We're in fact only doing things that speed it up. So, thank you.